Cowboy saw an Apache woman washing her clothes by the river and noticed her dress was torn to pieces. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Harlan Voss rode along the narrow trail that cut through the outskirts of Sagewater Bend as the late afternoon settled into a steady, cooling dimness. His horse moved at a slow, practiced pace, hooves pressing into the dry earth with a faint, rhythmic thud. The land around him was quiet except for the rustle of thin brush and the soft push of river wind against his coat. He had ridden this path hundreds of times over the years, checking his cattle and making sure nothing dragged wolves or bandits onto his property. He preferred a routine that never changed. It kept his thoughts from straying back to the house he once lived in, to a wife and newborn son he buried long before he was ready to stop being a husband or a father. At 38, Harlan moved like a man who had trained himself not to hope for anything. He lived alone in a small cabin 3 miles south of town, spending his days repairing fences, watching his grazing stock, and avoiding conversations that had no purpose. The river trail was part of that routine. It took him past the grazing fields, past the tree line, and back home before the cold settled too deep. Today should have felt the same, but as he guided his horse around a bend near a cluster of cottonwoods, he caught sight of movement down by the water. He slowed immediately. The horse's ears perked up. Harlan straightened in the saddle, shifting his weight to get a clearer view. A woman knelt near the riverbank, her body leaning over a piece of torn deerskin clothing she scrubbed against a flat stone. Her motions were small and shaky, each stroke made with more desperation than strength. The fabric she worked on carried smeared and dried blood, darkened patches that refused to wash away. Her long black hair hung wet down her back, dripping into the shallow water. Her dress clung to her curves, heavy with river water, torn low enough across the chest that he could see bruises along her collarbone and the accidental opening where stitching had ripped during some violent struggle. She held the dress tighter across her chest, as if she feared it might slip further. She looked exhausted, not tired from a day's work, but worn to the edge of collapse. Harlan could see the tremor in her hands and the way her knees sank deeper into the wet sand each time she leaned forward. Her bare feet were scraped and reddened, and small cuts marked her ankles in thin lines. She hadn't noticed him yet. Harlan watched her for a few seconds, trying to understand whether she posed a threat, whether someone might be hiding nearby, whether she needed help or wanted to avoid him entirely. Years alone had made him cautious. He did not approach strangers without purpose. When his horse exhaled sharply, the woman's head snapped up. Her eyes locked onto him with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. She gripped the torn dress to her chest with both hands, pulling it higher in a reflexive attempt to cover the exposed bruises. Harlan lifted one hand slowly and eased the reins, signaling that he wasn't here to chase her off or drag her anywhere she didn't want to go. He dismounted with deliberate calm, boots settling into the dirt without a heavy sound. He kept enough distance that she wouldn't feel cornered. The woman's breathing turned shallow, her eyes darting between his face, his hands, and the trail behind him. She looked like someone who had run far and no longer had the strength to keep going. Harlan crouched down, unhooked his canteen, and placed it on the ground halfway between them. He didn't push it toward her. He didn't speak. He stepped back and let her decide. She hesitated only a moment before crawling forward and taking the canteen with unsteady fingers. She lifted it carefully and drank in short, controlled sips, as if she wasn't sure how long the water had to last. After swallowing, she breathed out shakily and set the canteen down again. Her voice came out strained. "I escaped," she said. She glanced at her torn dress, eyes tightening with something between pain and shame. "Bad men. They came at night. They hurt many." Her fingers brushed a bloodstain on the fabric. "Some of this is theirs. Some is mine." Harlan felt the familiar tension move through his chest. He didn't react outwardly, but the details hit him clearly. Raiders. Violence. Someone left alive by luck or stubbornness. His mind shifted immediately toward threat assessment. Whether those men were close, how many there were, whether they were tracking her. He scanned the riverbank and the tree line, looking for prints or movement, but saw nothing new. He kept his voice level. "You running alone?" She nodded. "Since dawn." "How far?" he asked. She pointed north with a small motion. "From the ridge. I ran until my legs burned." That distance was several miles. Running barefoot over sharp terrain would have torn her feet, and it had. He studied her carefully. Her injuries, her clothing, her posture, everything pointed to someone who had been through violence and barely escaped with her life. He felt a tight pull in his chest, an unwelcome reminder of the day he buried his family and realized there was no one left to protect. The woman watched him assess her, waiting for judgment. Her jaw tensed. "If you want me gone," she said, "say it." Harlan shook his head once. "I don't want that." She blinked, thrown off by the answer. Her legs wobbled when she tried to stand. The dress slipped in her hands, exposing more of her bruised chest before she caught it. She sucked in a breath, humiliated by how easily the fabric betrayed her. Harlan looked away long enough to give her privacy, then reached out only when she swayed again. "You need help standing," he said. She hesitated, eyes searching his face for intent. His expression stayed steady, unreadable but not threatening. After a moment, she let him steady her by the arm. Her skin felt cold from the river. The tremor in her muscles was clear. She managed to stand upright, though her legs shook. Harlan saw more scrapes down her thigh and a deep bruise along her hip. She pulled the torn dress over herself as tightly as she could. "Got somewhere to go?" he asked. "No." Her voice cracked slightly on the word. "No tribe. No home. No family now." He nodded once. A direct answer deserved a direct response. "You can come to my place," he said. "It's close." She stared at him for several seconds, her breathing uneven, her shoulders rising slowly. She looked like someone caught between the instinct to run and the instinct to collapse. Trust didn't come easily to her, and he didn't expect it to, but he also knew she wouldn't survive another night alone. Finally, she whispered, "I will go." Harlan helped her onto his horse, keeping his touch calm and steady. Her hands gripped the saddle horn as she tried to pull herself up, but when she lifted her arms, the neckline fell again. She caught it quickly, cheeks flushing with distress. He turned his gaze away until she had secured it. Once she was stable, he mounted behind her, leaving enough space not to frighten her while maintaining a grip on the reins. As they rode toward his cabin, her body swayed with exhaustion. She held the torn dress, closed with both hands, her breathing uneven. Harlan watched the path ahead while keeping close enough to steady her if she slipped. The sky dimmed. The wind cooled. The river sounds faded behind them. Harlan didn't know who the men were who attacked her, where they were, or what they wanted. But he knew one thing clearly. Leaving her behind was not an option he could live with. He guided his horse forward, carrying a woman who had nothing left, toward a cabin that had felt empty for years. Harlan reached his cabin just as the last daylight slipped behind the ridge, leaving the yard in a dim, cold stillness. The cabin sat low against the land, built from rough timber he had cut himself years earlier, the edges worn and uneven from storms and long seasons of neglect. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin line. He always kept the fire smoldering when he left so the place wouldn't freeze before he returned. Tala looked at the building with a tense curiosity, her eyes drifting over the walls, the tools hanging by the shed, and the small corral where two horses lifted their heads, watching the newcomers silently. She sat stiffly on the horse as they stopped, gripping her torn dress with both hands. Her breathing held a quiet strain, as though she feared what waited inside the cabin more than what she had escaped. Harlan dismounted first, walked a few steps to steady the horse, then reached up toward her. She froze, unsure again, and he paused long enough for her to understand she could take her time. Her voice was tight when she spoke. "I can climb down." "All right," he said, stepping back. She slid off the horse slowly, landing unsteadily on her scraped feet. The moment she put weight on them, pain shot up her legs, and she clenched her jaw hard. Harlan noticed the way her knees buckled, so he reached lightly toward her elbow. She didn't pull away this time. She let him steady her while she found her balance again, and he felt how cold her skin had become. The cabin door creaked loudly when he pushed it open. Warmth drifted out from the fire inside, carrying the smell of cooked beans and old wood. Tala looked around with guarded eyes, noting the single bed tucked against the far wall, the small table with one chair, the shelf of supplies she didn't yet trust to touch. The interior was kept clean, not tidy from habit but from necessity. One person living alone tended to put everything back where it belonged because no one else would. Harlan shut the door behind them, keeping his voice low and even. "You can sit." Tala remained near the wall instead, holding the torn dress across her chest with one hand and pressing her back lightly against the logs as though grounding herself. Her eyes lingered on the folded blanket over the chair, the boots near the door, and the half-finished carving on the table. Each detail told her something about the man helping her. He lived simply, he worked with his hands, and he spent most nights alone with nothing but chores to occupy him. Her stomach made a faint sound, and she lowered her gaze in embarrassment. Harlan caught it and crossed the room to the pot hanging above the fire. He ladled warm beans into a tin bowl and placed it gently on the table before stepping away. "Eat what you can," he said. "You need strength." She hesitated again, unsure if she was allowed, then moved slowly to the table and picked up the spoon. Her hand shook once before she steadied herself. The first mouthful made her pause, and she swallowed carefully, as if she hadn't eaten a proper meal since before dawn. Harlan pretended not to notice how fast she ate the next few bites, giving her the dignity of silence. Once she'd eaten enough to ease the worst of her hunger, she rested the spoon and sat very still, waiting for his next words. Harlan kept near the fire, rubbing the dirt from his hands and letting her breathe. After a moment, he spoke. "You've been running long enough to tear your feet like that," he said quietly. "Who was chasing you?" Her jaw tightened. "White men. 3, maybe 4. They came to take things from us." She paused. They were armed. They didn't care who lived. Harlan listened, absorbing each detail. This answered questions any listener would have wondered. Why she was here, how she escaped, whether the danger was close. Tala's voice wavered only when she added, "They killed my sister. She tried to shield a child." They did not stop. Harlan's breath drew in sharply, the weight of her words settling heavy between them. He didn't speak immediately. He didn't know how to soothe the kind of grief she carried, but he understood its shape. Grief wasn't something that burned hot and loud. It pressed down slow and constant, leaving a person unsure whether to scream or sit still. After a moment, he crouched by a small trunk near the bed, opened it, and pulled out a gray shirt he rarely wore. It was clean, softer than most of his clothes, the closest thing to comfort he owned. He held out to her. "This will cover you," he said. She accepted it slowly, fingers brushing the fabric as though testing if it was truly offered. She didn't change immediately. Instead, she held it close to her chest while keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. She wasn't sure yet how much of her safety depended on him, and that uncertainty made her stand stiffly, the torn dress still clutched around her chest. Harlan stood and turned his back to give her privacy. "You can change while I step outside to check the horses," he said, keeping his tone matter-of-fact so she wouldn't feel pressured. She let out a small, shaky breath. "Thank you." He stepped out into the night air, leaving her alone with the crackling fire. As he checked the horses, tightening a loose strap and making sure no tracks followed them to the yard, he let his thoughts settle. He had not planned to bring someone into his home again. He wasn't sure if he could handle seeing another person hurt under his roof. But leaving her at the river hadn't been an option. He knew that the moment he saw the blood on her dress. Inside the cabin, Tala slipped out of the wet deerskin garment, wincing when the fabric pulled at her bruises. She put on Harlan's shirt, the hem falling almost to her knees, the collar loose enough that she had to gather it closed with one hand. The fabric felt warm, carrying the faint scent of smoke and dry earth. For the first time since dawn, she felt covered enough to breathe without panic. When Harlan returned, she stood slightly away from the fire, the shirt hanging long on her, her bare legs marked by dried mud and small cuts. She watched him with cautious eyes, unsure how a man like him judged someone who arrived half-dressed, wounded, and hunted. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll stay by the fire." Her throat tightened. No man had ever offered her safety without expectation. She studied his face, looking for hidden intentions, but found only a quiet, steady seriousness. As he spread a blanket near the hearth, she asked in a low voice, "Why help me?" He didn't pause his movements. "Because you needed someone." She absorbed his answer, simple and clear, without anything beneath it to fear. She sat on the bed slowly, legs trembling as the day's exhaustion finally caught up to her. The silence between them felt different now. Not tense, but careful, like two people trying to understand how to exist in the same space without causing harm. Before lying down, she asked, "If those men come, will you send me away?" "No," he said, "I won't." She breathed out slowly, lowering herself onto the thin mattress with her hand gripping the shirt's front. She watched him as the fire cast shifting light across his face, revealing the shadows beneath his eyes, the tired lines carved there by years of loneliness and the kind of memories that never faded. For the first time since she fled her camp, she felt the possibility of surviving the night. When the cabin settled into quiet, Harlan kept watch without saying another word, and Tala closed her eyes without fear what she might wake to. The fire had burned down to a steady glow by the time the cabin settled into full night. Outside, the wind pushed lightly against the walls, carrying the distant chirp of crickets and the faint groan of trees shifting in the dark. Harlan sat near the hearth, one knee drawn up, his back resting against the side of the table as he kept his eyes on the room. Tala lay on the bed with her fingers curled into the front of his shirt, her breathing uneven from the exhaustion that had finally overtaken her. Every now and then she twitched lightly, the kind of involuntary movement that came from a mind still trapped in the memory of running. He stayed awake because he didn't trust the quiet. Raiders didn't always give up when one survivor slipped away. They tracked, they waited, they circled areas they thought would yield something valuable. And the more he thought about the distance Tala had run and the number of men she named, the more he realized she hadn't escaped an aimless group. They had purpose. They were looking for something or someone. That single detail had been left unclear, and he knew anyone listening would wonder exactly what those men wanted. He turned that question over in his mind as the fire cracked once. Raiders usually sought supplies, livestock, weapons, or women they believed they could sell. But Tala had said they came without warning and struck fast. He sensed there was more to the story, something she hadn't shared yet. He didn't blame her for holding back. Trauma made details complicated. A faint sound drew his attention to the bed. Tala stirred, shifting her weight slowly, her eyes half opening as she tried to orient herself. She blinked a few times, her breathing sharp for a moment before she realized she wasn't outside anymore. Her hand tightened on the shirt collar, securing it against her chest, the fabric sliding slightly over her shoulder as she sat up. Harlan straightened, making sure she didn't wake to silence alone. She looked over at him, and for the first time, there wasn't fear in her eyes, only confusion and the lingering haze of a nightmare. "You're safe," he said quietly. "Nothing's nearby." She scanned the cabin, taking in the walls, the fire, the open space. Her body relaxed, but only slightly. "I dreamt they found me," she murmured. "I tried to move, but my legs would not work." She frowned, realizing something. "I did not ask. How far are your neighbors?" "There aren't any close," Harlan answered. "Closest homestead is 4 miles east, and I doubt they saw any riders today." She nodded slowly, absorbing that. Anyone listening might have wondered how isolated the cabin really was, or if Harlan had others he could call on. Now she understood he lived far from anyone who might step in quickly. He preferred it that way. She shifted again, letting her feet touch the floor. When she stood, her knees trembled and she grabbed the side of the bed to keep steady. Harlan rose as well, not to crowd her, but to stop her from hitting the ground if she fell. "I should check your ankle," he said. She hesitated, then extended her leg with controlled caution. He knelt, examining the swelling that had worsened during the night. He pressed lightly against the outer skin, watching her reaction. She winced but didn't pull back. Her voice was low. I walked through stones. I did not feel them until now. You push yourself harder than you should have, he replied. You tore the skin pretty deep. He stood and retrieved a small tin of sal from a shelf. Tala watched him with interest, as though unsure how a man who lived alone kept supplies she recognized. Before applying it, he spoke again. You said they came for your people. Did you see them take anything from your camp? Her eyes flickered downward. They wanted our rifles. We had only a few. They thought there were more. That answered another unspoken question: why raiders would attack a camp with little to gain. They wanted weapons to trade or sell, and when they didn't find enough, they took anger out on the people. Tala continued, voice tightening. They asked for my father. He was not there. They thought he hid weapons somewhere. They did not believe us. She swallowed hard. My sister spoke. They struck her first. Harlan let the details settle. It made sense now. The raiders believed the camp held something worth taking. That gave him a clearer sense of the danger. He applied the salve gently, spreading it along the scraped skin. Tala tensed but stayed still. The warmth of the mixture eased some of the swelling. When he finished wrapping it with a strip of cloth, she lowered her leg slowly, testing the weight. You won't walk far today, he said. She lifted her head. Do you want me gone so soon? No, he responded, meeting her eyes. I want you healed. That answer surprised her. She had expected distance, maybe reluctance, but not the quiet reassurance he offered. She looked at him for a moment, as if trying to see past the steady exterior he carried like armor. The cabin creaked as a gust of wind hit the side. Tala's attention drifted to the window, then back to him. Will those men search this area? She asked. They might, he said honestly. Men like that don't give up quickly. But they don't know you came this way. Your tracks ended at the river. That helps us. She took in the word us, hearing something she didn't expect, an acknowledgement that her survival now involved both of them. The thought unsettled and comforted her at the same time. Her body wavered, and she reached out instinctively to steady herself against the table. Harlan stepped closer and lifted her arm, guiding her into the chair with slow care. She sank down with a tight breath. He went to the cupboard and pulled out a clean tin cup, filling it with water. She held it in both hands, drinking it slowly, the movement of her throat visible as she swallowed. He watched to make sure she didn't choke, noticing how her fingers trembled from lingering fear rather than exhaustion alone. When she lowered the cup, she asked something she hadn't dared yet. Why does a man like you live alone here? He took a moment to answer, not because he was hiding the truth, but because saying it out loud still felt like loosening an old wound. I lost my family, my wife and son. After that, I didn't want to stay near people. Tala looked at him with a quiet, thoughtful expression. This place keeps you from remembering. No, he said. It keeps others from asking about it. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. She wasn't someone who pushed for details. She had enough sorrow of her own. Harlan moved to the window and scanned the dark outside. Tala watched him, sensing his focus sharpen. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you see anything? No riders, he replied. But I'm going to check the trail at sunrise. If they followed you, I need to know how close they are. She lowered her cup, the worry settling back on her. If they find you because of me. They won't, he said, cutting off her fear with certainty. And if they try, they won't get far. His tone wasn't loud or aggressive. It was settled, firm, and grounded in a history of surviving men like that. Tala let the reassurance sink in, even if worry still flickered behind her eyes. The fire brightened as he added another piece of wood. She shifted in her chair, pulling the shirt tighter over her chest as the collar loosened again. She wasn't used to wearing something that wasn't fitted to her body. What will I do while you're gone? She asked. You'll stay inside, he said. Rest. Eat. Don't strain your leg. She nodded, though the idea of depending on anyone unsettled her. She didn't trust safety easily, but she trusted the room more than the wilderness she escaped. He walked past her, setting his rifle near the door. She watched the way he moved, noticing his limp for the first time. She hadn't seen it clearly the night before. The stiffness in his left step told her he wasn't unbreakable, and that made his willingness to help her mean more than she expected. She spoke softly. "Your leg, is it hurt?" "Old injury," he answered. "Doesn't slow me much." But she saw the way he shifted weight to compensate. She realized then that he wasn't helping her because he was stronger or safer than everyone else. He was helping her because he chose to, despite the risk. Her voice lowered. "I will not bring trouble on you if I can stop it." "You're not the cause," he replied. "Those men are." The way he said it left no room for self-blame. Tala exhaled slowly, her body easing back into the chair. For the first time since she arrived, she looked like someone who believed she might make it through the next day. The cabin warmed steadily as the fire grew. Harlan sat near the door with his rifle close, his eyes on the shadows outside. Tala watched him for a long moment, recognizing something she hadn't seen in anyone since her family scattered. She was no longer facing the night alone. The first light of dawn pushed through the window in a dull, pale strip, fading across the cabin floor as the fire died down to embers. Harlan stood before Tala woke, checking his rifle, tightening the worn strap on his shoulder, and making sure each round was clean. Tala opened her eyes slowly, noticing the change in his posture before she said anything. He was preparing to leave, and the seriousness in his face made her straighten, gripping the blanket around her legs. "Are they close?" she asked, her voice tight from sleep. "I won't know until I look," he answered quietly. "I won't be gone long." He didn't mention the possibility of riders tracking the river trail or the prints he thought he saw near the bend the night before. There were details she didn't need to panic over, not until he was sure. Tala tried to stand, but her ankle protested immediately. She grabbed the bedpost to steady herself and looked toward the window. The land outside glowed with early morning cold, a thin frost covering the small patch of ground near the shed. She scanned the area with the same carefulness Harlan used, wanting to see signs of danger herself. Something else gnawed at her. Why raiders had pursued her camp more fiercely than others in the region. Listeners might have wondered the same, and she finally spoke the truth quietly. "There was a trader who came through our camp 2 weeks ago. He said my father refused to sell something. I did not know what it was." Harlan paused at the door. "Did the raiders ask about it?" "Yes," she said. "They kept demanding it, even when they saw he was gone." Harlan weighed this information, realizing the attack wasn't random. Someone told the raiders her camp had something valuable, something worth killing for. Captain Reyes, a notorious smuggler from 2 counties over, had been moving through the region lately. Harlan had heard whispers in town. He wondered if that man had connections to the attack. Tala didn't know this name, but her fear revealed enough. Her people had been targeted, not chosen by chance. He moved toward her slowly. "Whatever they wanted, they think you know where it is." "I told them I don't," she said, gripping the blanket tightly. "They didn't believe me. That's why they'll look for you," he said, not to scare her, but because she deserved the truth. "But they won't find you here." She studied his face, the set of his jaw, the tired lines around his eyes. "Why are you helping me when you owe me nothing?" He didn't look away. "Because those men did something that can't be undone. I won't let them finish it." She held his gaze a little longer, as though trying to read the parts of him he didn't voice. She saw something she hadn't noticed before, a man who had lost enough already and wouldn't stand by while it happened to someone else. He stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. Tala listened to the crunch of his boots as he walked across the yard. She moved to the window, keeping her weight off her injured ankle, watching him walk toward the ridge where the land dipped. He scanned the horizon with his rifle slung across his back. She found herself focused on how purposeful his movements were, cautious but certain, as if he had been doing this long before she existed. Inside the cabin, Tala pushed herself to be useful despite her injury. She folded the blanket, cleaned the bowl from the night before, and checked the room for anything she might need if she had to hide quickly. Listeners would wonder if she had any tracking skills of her own, and the truth came quietly as she worked. Yes, she had grown up learning how to read broken branches, faint tracks, and the smell of disturbed earth. But she couldn't help Harlan while her foot throbbed with each step. She eventually eased herself into the chair by the fire and waited. Outside, Harlan followed the trail down toward the creek, eyes tracing each mark on the ground. He moved slowly, inspecting every patch of earth. A set of boot prints appeared near the river, pressed deep into the mud. Not his, not Tala's. They were fresh, likely made during the night. He crouched down, touching the edge of the footprint, feeling the shape where the heel dug in. Whoever made it wore worn-out boots, someone who traveled long distances. Another print sat beside it, but lighter, suggesting two men, one heavier than the other. He followed the tracks a short distance before they stopped abruptly at the river's edge. The raiders had used the water to hide their direction. That meant they were skilled, not amateurs. He scanned the opposite bank, noticing a faint disturbance in the brush 50 yards ahead. Someone had stepped out of the water and climbed the slope. The air felt colder as he realized they had passed closer to his land than he expected. When he returned to the cabin, Tala looked at him immediately. She saw the tension in his jaw before he spoke. "They were here," he said. "Not far." Her breath hitched, and she rose slightly from the chair. "How many?" "Two for sure. Maybe more." She swallowed hard. "Did they see the cabin?" "Doesn't look like it." He moved closer. "But they're tracking you, and they're not guessing. They know how to move without leaving much behind." Tala's pulse quickened. She knew what that meant. Raiders who could follow tracks through water didn't give up until they finished their job. Fear tightened her chest, and her fingers dug into the fabric of his shirt she still wore. Harlan pulled a chair closer to her. "You need to tell me if there's anything your father kept hidden. Something those men could think you know about." Tala held his gaze. He had a pouch he never opened. He kept it under his sleeping mat. "I never saw what was inside." "You think that's what they wanted?" "I don't know," she said. "But they ransacked everything in his tent. They kept saying he hid something important." She looked away. "If they learn I'm alive, they may think I know where it is." Harlan let the information settle in his mind. A hidden pouch, a camp torn apart because of it, raiders moving with precision. Someone wanted that item badly enough to kill for it. His next words were steady. "You're staying inside until your foot heals. After that, we'll figure the rest out." She hesitated, unsure. "You don't need to protect me. You could tell me to leave." "I won't," he said. "You didn't ask for this." Her breath softened. "Neither did you." He didn't respond, but the silence carried meaning. He wasn't doing this out of duty. Something about her fear, her strength, and her refusal to break made him stand between her and danger without question. A sudden sound outside made her stiffen. She turned quickly, gripping the edge of the table. Harlan lifted his rifle, but relaxed a moment later when he recognized the noise. Just wind loosening a piece of tin on the shed roof. Still, he kept the rifle near. Tala exhaled, but her hands shook from the adrenaline. He stepped toward her, lowering his voice. "They're not here now. How can you be sure?" "Because I've lived alone long enough to feel when someone's too close," he said. "If they knew about this cabin, we'd have heard them before dawn." She watched him carefully, reading the certainty in his face. Her hand loosened on the table. The fear didn't vanish, but it settled into something quieter. Harlan added another log to the fire, and the room filled with warmer light. The flames cast steady shadows across the walls. Tala shifted in her seat, curling her legs slightly as she pulled the shirt lower across her thighs. She'd been wearing it since the night before, and it felt strange but comforting, soft, warm, protective in a way her deerskin dress hadn't been since her escape. Harlan sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. Tala studied him for a long moment. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I'll fortify the cabin," he said. "Check the shed. Move the horses to the back corral. If those men come, I want them slowed before they get close." She nodded, understanding he wasn't preparing to run. He was preparing to stand his ground. That realization made something tight inside her ease in a way she hadn't expected. She had been alone since the attack, but Harlan was making it clear she wasn't alone anymore. He stood and reached for his coat. "Stay near the fire. Keep weight off that foot. I'll be outside." She rose slightly in her chair. "Harlan," he turned back. "I'm grateful," she said, choosing the word carefully. "No one else stopped when I ran." He didn't smile. He didn't change expression, but he nodded once, slow and sincere. "Rest," he said. We'll need clear heads for whatever comes next. As he stepped out into the cold morning air, Tala watched the door close and felt something she hadn't known for days. Not safety yet, but the first real chance of it. Harlan stepped back into the cabin just as the sun cleared the ridge, bringing a strip of sharp daylight across the floorboards. Tala looked up quickly when the door opened, searching his face for clues before he said anything. The strain in her shoulders eased slightly when she saw he wasn't rushed or out of breath. He hung his coat on the peg near the door and set his rifle against the wall, lowering himself into the chair with a heaviness that showed how much he'd been thinking. She shifted in her seat, the oversized shirt sliding down her shoulder until she pulled it back up. "Did you find anything else?" she asked, her voice tense. "I found a trail I don't like," he said. "Tracks heading south. 3 sets this time, not 2. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to wrap his head around the pattern. "They're spreading out, searching instead of following a straight path." Tala's breath caught. "Looking for survivors?" "Looking for you," he corrected gently. "They'll cover a wide range until they find something that leads them closer." The admission hit her hard, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair with sudden force. She lowered her eyes, trying to calm her breathing. Many listeners might wonder why these raiders were so certain she had the information they wanted. The truth emerged slowly as she spoke. "Before the attack, my father argued with the trader I told you about. I thought it was nothing, but I remember hearing the trader say, 'If you won't sell it, someone else will take it.' I didn't understand then. Now I do." Harlan leaned forward. "So the raiders were hired." "That is what I fear," she whispered. "Someone paid them to get whatever my father hid. But they didn't know he left the camp 2 days earlier." "So you were the only one left they could pressure," Harlan said, piecing it together. Tala nodded. "They kept saying I would talk if I saw enough pain." Harlan felt a cold anger rise inside him. He had seen men like that before. Men who believed violence could force answers. Men who tore families apart without hesitation. He didn't raise his voice, but the tension in his jaw made it clear he wouldn't let such men near her again. Tala watched him carefully. She could tell the danger bothered him more than he showed. "Will they come here soon?" she asked. "They'll come near," he said. "But this cabin sits off the trail. If they don't know about it, they won't find it by accident." He paused. "That gives us time." She repeated with a quiet disbelief. "You're not facing this alone," he said. "Not here." Her fingers relaxed their grip. She had been waiting for him to change his mind, to send her away before the trouble found them both. Instead, he spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had already chosen his path. He stood and reached for a wooden crate near the wall, dragging it toward the table. "I'm going to reinforce the cabin today," he said. "If they circle too close, I want us ready." Tali shifted forward. "I can help." "You can't put weight on that ankle," he replied. "You'll tear it worse." "I can use my hands," she insisted, her voice steady despite the pain. "Give me something to mend, something to cut, something to grind." Harlan hesitated. She wasn't trying to prove strength. She was trying not to feel useless. He understood that feeling too well. He nodded once. "There's a pile of dried herbs by the shelf. You can sort them. And if your dress can be saved, I'll bring it in." He stepped outside again. Tala watched the door close, then slowly got up, keeping her weight on her good foot. She moved to the shelf and began laying out herbs in neat lines, separating them by scent and use. Pain relief, swelling, fever, cleansing. Her hands worked with quiet precision. Harlan noticed when he returned with her torn dress in his hand. The garment was worse in the daylight, blood-stained, ripped down the front, and torn at the side seam. Tala's breath faltered when she saw it. "I should throw it away," she said softly. "Do you want to?" Harlan asked, offering the choice instead of deciding for her. She considered it. The dress held memories she would never want again, but it was also the last thing she had from her home. After a long pause, she shook her head. "No, but I cannot wear it." "Then I'll wash out what I can," he said. "You can mend the rest later, if you want to." Her eyes softened, touched by the simple respect in his tone. As he stepped back outside to draw water, Tala placed both hands on the table, grounding herself. She watched him through the window. The way he moved with measured care despite his limp. The way he checked the yard twice before starting a task. the way he looked toward the ridge every few minutes as if expecting danger. His caution made her feel protected rather than trapped. That was new for her. When he returned, she was sorting herbs into small piles. "You know these well," he observed. "My mother taught me," she said. "She said healing is a way of defending your people." Harlan set the bucket down. "Smart woman." Tala hesitated before asking something that had been lingering in her thoughts. "The men chasing us, do you think they know how far I ran?" "They know you're alive," he answered. "But they don't know where you dropped out of sight. River washed most of your trail. That's why it's taking them longer." Her shoulders eased slightly. It wasn't perfect safety, but it was better than she feared. Harlan spent the rest of the morning reinforcing the cabin. He hammered extra boards across the window frames, inspected the hinges on the door, and stacked heavy logs beside the outer wall to form a small barrier. Tala watched from inside, studying how he worked. He didn't rush. He planned each move like someone who had lived through ambushes before. She spoke quietly when he came back in, brushing dust off his hands. "You move like someone who has seen trouble." He sat down across from her. "I used to ride scout for the cavalry," he said, "long before I settled here." Her eyes widened slightly. "Did you leave because of your family?" "After they died, I didn't want to follow orders anymore," he said. "Didn't see the point in trying to fix the world when I couldn't fix my own home." She understood that better than he expected. She looked down at the herbs, sorting another small pile. "Then why help me?" she asked again, not accusingly, but with genuine confusion. Harlan leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "Because you shouldn't pay for something someone else caused," he said, "and because no one deserves to be hunted down for something they didn't do." Tala's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to say exactly that. A sudden rustling outside made them both look toward the window. Tala's breath stopped for a second. Harlan moved quietly to the wall and peered out. After a tense moment, he stepped back. "Just a deer," he said, "but it's good practice to stay alert." Her pulse slowed, but she didn't relax completely. "If they come, what will you do?" "Whatever's needed," he answered. The calm certainty in his voice settled deeper than fear ever could. As the fire warmed the cabin and the morning passed into midday, Tala realized something unexpected. She trusted him enough not to run. And Harlan realized something he hadn't expected either. He didn't mind her presence in his quiet world. It made the place feel less hollow. When he glanced at her again, she was watching him with a look he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not suspicion, something steadier, something beginning. The afternoon settled over the cabin with a heavy stillness, the kind that made every small sound stand out. Harlan checked the latch on the door again before crossing the room. Tala was seated near the table, her ankle resting on a folded blanket, her hands working over the torn dress he had brought inside earlier. She wasn't mending it. She was examining every seam, every rip, every stain, as though searching for clues she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Harlan noticed the concentration on her face and walked closer. "You remember something?" he asked. She looked up, hesitant. "My father's pouch, there was a mark stitched inside it. I never asked what it meant." She turned the dress in her hands. "This was made by my mother. She always stitched a small symbol in her work. But my father's pouch had a different mark, one I did not recognize." She paused. "That traitor saw it when my father argued with him." Harlan leaned against the table. "What kind of mark?" "A spiral with 3 lines," she said. "Not Apache. Something else." Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly. A memory stirred. He had seen similar symbols years ago when he was scouting near the border. Some traders used markings to identify valuable goods, the kind that could be exchanged quietly without law interference. That meant Tala's father might have been holding something rare or dangerous, something he hadn't wanted to sell. The raiders weren't acting alone. Someone with money had decided they wanted that item badly, badly enough to pay men to kill for it. "Your father didn't tell your people about the pouch?" Harlan asked. "No," she said. "He was careful. He said some things belong only to the one who protects them. I thought he meant a family memory." Her face tightened. "Now I think he carried something he was told to keep hidden." Listeners might have wondered why a simple pouch could create such violent interest. Harlan saw the bigger picture forming. This wasn't about a family heirloom or a personal item. It was about value, secrecy, and the kind of greed that drew the worst men across miles of land. He pulled a chair closer and sat across from her. "Those men believe you know where that pouch ended up," he said. "But you don't." "I don't," she said quietly. "My father left before the attack. I don't know where he went." "Did he tell anyone?" Harlan asked. "No," she said. "He left in the night. He said he needed to speak to someone far from the camp." That detail hadn't come up before. It changed everything. If Tala's father left willingly to meet someone, he might still be alive. The raiders might also be searching for him, not just her. Harlan kept that thought to himself for now. He didn't want to give her hope that might break later. Tala adjusted the collar of his shirt again as it slipped across her shoulder. Her fingers brushed the fabric as though grounding herself. "If these men find us," she said softly, "they will think you know something too." Harlan rested his forearms on his knees. "I've been up against men like this before. They rely on fear. They count on people running. But I don't run." His tone stayed level, not arrogant, just a simple statement of fact. Tala looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude with worry. "I don't want to bring more loss into your life." "You're not," he said. "You didn't bring them here. They're coming because someone paid them to chase a rumor." She held his gaze. "You believe me without question." He nodded once. "You haven't lied yet." The simplicity of that answer softened something inside her. She had spent the last 2 days expecting betrayal, expecting someone to take advantage of her fear. Instead, Harlan gave her space, choice, and honesty, things she thought she had lost when her camp was destroyed. A knock of wind against the wall made her flinch. Harlan stood quickly and checked the window. The light outside had shifted, the sky turning a dull, bruised gray, hinting at an approaching storm. "Weather's turning," he said. "Storm clouds coming from the west. They might hide tracks for a while." Tala listened carefully. Storms can cover sounds. They might travel closer under the noise. He nodded. "Which means we stay inside today." She leaned forward slightly. "Do you think they saw your land?" "No," he said, "but they're searching in circles. It's only a matter of time before they move south." Her fingers tightened around the cloth in her hands. "Then tell me how to help." He studied her for a long moment. She wasn't asking to defend herself out of pride. She was asking because fear of helplessness kept tightening inside her. He grabbed a small knife from the shelf and set it on the table. "You may need this," he said, "in case someone reaches the door before I do." She looked at the knife, then at him. "Do you think they will come here today?" He shook his head. "Storm's coming. They'll hide out somewhere until it passes. But after that, all bets are off." Tala brushed her thumb along the wooden handle. "My father used to say storms make men reckless." "True," Harlan said, fastening a board over the lower part of the window. "But storms also give us time to prepare." She watched him secure each window panel and reinforce the door frame he'd tightened earlier. Every nail he hammered had a deliberate rhythm, each hit controlled. Not rushed, not frantic, just steady. Listeners might have wondered how a lone rancher could defend a cabin against multiple riders. Harlan silently answered that concern as he moved around the room, checking the rifle, arranging the spare rounds, shifting the heavy table slightly toward the door to create partial cover. He had lived ambushes before. He knew how to fight defensively, and he wasn't planning to let anyone through that door without a cost. Tala observed everything, committing his movements to memory. "You've done this before," she said. "Yes," he replied simply. "A long time ago." She folded her hands on her lap, the shirt falling low across her chest until she adjusted it again. "Did you ever lose men under your watch?" He stopped for a brief second, then resumed, tightening the hinge. "Yes." She didn't press him further. She recognized the weight in his tone, the kind that only came from real regret. "You carry that still," she said gently. "Some things don't fade," he admitted, "but I learned how to keep others alive." Lightning cracked faintly in the distance, not close enough to shake the cabin, but enough to warn of the storm building over the horizon. The wind pushed harder against the walls, and the flames in the hearth flickered. Tala turned toward the window. "If they come after the storm, will you still stand your ground?" "I will," he said, "and I'll make sure they don't touch you." She swallowed, her voice low. "Why does my safety matter so much to you?" Harlan didn't answer right away. He finished adjusting a board, then leaned one hand on the table, meeting her eyes with a seriousness that reached her deeper than she expected. "Because you deserve better than what they gave you," he said. "And because no one should face men like that alone." Her breath trembled as she held his gaze. Words felt too heavy, too close to something she hadn't let herself feel in days. She looked down, her fingers brushing her leg lightly as she tried to keep her voice steady. "You're risking a lot." "So are you," he replied. "You trusted me." The storm wind pressed hard against the cabin, rattling one of the shutters. Tala stood, balancing carefully on her good foot, moving closer to him. She didn't touch him, but she stood near enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. Outside, the sky darkened further. Inside, the space between them grew warmer, steadier, filled with something forming slowly, without either of them naming it yet. Rain began tapping against the roof not long after the storm reached full strength. The wind pushed steady sheets of water against the walls, turning the surrounding land into a blurred, shifting curtain of gray. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked sharply as drops worked their way down the stone chimney. Harlan checked the shutter once more, sliding the final latch into place. Tala watched him from where she stood by the table, her injured ankle wrapped tightly and propped on a folded blanket. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, keeping it closed whenever the collar slipped. The storm gave them temporary safety, but also cut off escape routes, and that truth weighed heavily on both of them. Tala leaned forward slightly. "What if the raiders shelter close by?" she asked. "Storms make men impatient." "That's what worries me," Harlan said, adjusting his holster. "If they're waiting it out, they'll move at first light." He glanced at the roof. "But storms also hide sound. If they pass near the ridge, we won't hear them." Tala absorbed the information silently. Listeners might have wondered how far the raiders had spread or whether the storm would erase all trace of them. Tala answered part of that worry herself. "My people used to track raiders during storms. They slip in closer when the wind covers their noise. If these men know the land, they will use the storm the same way." Harlan nodded. "Then we prepare like they already have." He crossed to the cupboard and pulled out a second rifle, an older one, but functional. Tala frowned slightly, confused. "Why do you have two rifles?" she asked. "You live alone." He set the rifle on the table. "This one belonged to my brother," he said. "I kept it after he died. Couldn't bring myself to trade it." That detail had never been spoken before, and Tala paused, realizing the weight behind it. "Why bring it out now?" she asked. "Because if someone reaches this cabin, I want a spare nearby," he said. She considered his tone, calm but with a clear edge of preparation. "You think they'll come?" "I think they're close," he admitted. "Closer than yesterday." Thunder rolled through the land, shaking the shutters. Tala flinched, bracing her hands on the table. Harlan stepped toward her. "You all right?" "Yes," she said, though her breath trembled. "Storms remind me of hiding under blankets during raids when I was small. My mother would hold my shoulders until the noise stopped." She looked down. "I keep expecting I will see her when I wake." Harlan stayed quiet for a moment. He understood the feeling. Expecting ghosts to be in the next room was something he carried too. "She taught you well," he finally said. "You stayed alive because of her." Tala's eyes warmed with a sadness she didn't try to hide. "She would have liked you," she said softly. "You listen more than you speak." Harlan didn't know what to say to that, so he turned to adjust the fire. Tala watched him move, steady steps, guarded posture, careful breaths, and realized he was carrying far more pain than he admitted. She decided to ask the question she had avoided so far. "When your family died, was it sudden?" He froze for a brief second before answering. "It was quick," he said. "There was a sickness passing through the valley. Doctors didn't reach us in time." He tightened the log in the fire. "I tried to ride for help, but the storm kept me from making it back until morning." Tala listened closely, not interrupting. He hadn't shared this before, and she didn't take the trust lightly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "It's not your burden," he replied. "It becomes mine," she said, "if you keep it inside until it harms you." He turned toward her, surprised by the clarity in her tone. She met his gaze without flinching. Pain grows when no one hears it, she added. Harlan exhaled slowly. He didn't thank her, but something in his expression shifted, loosening the tension in his shoulders. A sharp crack outside cut the moment short. Something had stepped on a branch. Tala's eyes widened. That wasn't wind. Harlan moved to the window instantly, sliding the shutter open just enough to look through the narrow slit. Rain blurred the view, but a dark shape moved near the tree line. Too large to be an animal. Too upright. Harlan closed the shutter quietly. Stay down. Tala lowered herself beside the table, keeping weight off her injured ankle. She grabbed the small knife he had given her earlier and held it tightly. Her pulse hammered in her throat, her breathing sharp and controlled. Harlan crouched near the window, rifle ready, eyes trained on the yard. Another figure moved through the storm, barely visible, but definitely a man. He wasn't walking quickly, which meant he believed no one was watching. Tala whispered, "How many?" "Two for sure," Harlan replied under his breath. "Maybe a third behind them." She swallowed hard. "Did they see the cabin?" "No," he said. "They're scouting the ridge. If they knew this place existed, they wouldn't stay quiet." He watched the shadows move between trees. They were searching for prints, signs of passage, anything left behind by a fleeing survivor. Harlan whispered, "The storm erased your trail, but they might guess someone came this way." Tala clutched the knife. Her palms were sweating, but her grip didn't slip. "If they approach the door." "They won't get that close," Harlan said. "Not while I'm standing." Her chest rose in a shaky breath. Outside, one of the figures stopped near Harlan's woodpile, inspecting something on ground. A small mark in the dirt, the spot where Harlan had dropped a tool earlier. It wasn't a clear footprint, but it told him someone had been here recently. The man lifted his head slowly, scanning the area. Tala pressed her hand against her chest, holding the shirt closed as she leaned to look through the sliver of the window. Her breath tightened when she saw the man pause. "He knows," she whispered. "He suspects," Harlan corrected. Suspicion and certainty aren't the same. Lightning flashed, revealing another figure further back. Tall, armed, leaning on a rifle. "Watching. They're waiting for something," Harlan murmured. "Waiting for the storm to pass," Tala said. He nodded grimly. "They won't make their move in the rain. They'll circle. They'll listen. Then they'll regroup when the ground dries." She realized another concern listeners might have: how much food or water was inside the cabin, how long they could withstand a siege. She voiced it quietly. "Do we have enough provisions if we need to stay inside for days?" "We do," Harlan said. "I stocked up 2 weeks ago. Didn't know why at the time. Now I'm glad I did." "And ammunition?" she asked. "Enough to make them regret coming here," he said. Outside, the raiders slowly retreated into the storm, fading into the gray curtain of rain. Their footsteps were faint, but the silence they left behind felt heavier than their presence. Tala eased back from the window, her hands shaking from the adrenaline she'd tried to control. Harlan sat beside the fire again, tension carved into his posture. "They'll be back," she said. "Yes," he replied, "but we'll be ready." She looked at him with a mixture of fear, trust, and something deeper building beneath her worry. She didn't say it, but she felt it clearly. This man would not abandon her, no matter the cost. And for the first time since the night she ran, she believed she might survive what was coming next. The storm eased near dawn, leaving a cold, damp stillness over the land. Water dripped steadily from the roof and pooled in shallow patches across the yard. Harlan woke before the light fully settled, his instincts pulling him upright the moment the wind quieted. Tala was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with her fingers woven into the blanket. Her eyes searched his face for any sign of urgency. "Do they stay close?" she asked. "I don't hear them," he said, pulling on his coat. "But that doesn't mean they left." She pushed herself upright, balancing carefully on her good foot. "If they found signs of your tracks or movement." "They saw something," he cut in quietly, "enough to make them suspicious." He walked to the shutter and opened it a few inches, looking out at the yard. The ground outside was marked only by the storm's work: mud streaks, scattered branches, and puddles catching the faint morning light. If raiders had passed during the night, The rain covered nearly all trace. "They'll try again," he said. "Not today, but soon." Tala tightened the blanket around her shoulders. "My father must have carried something important," she said, thinking aloud. "Something worth enough to send men this far." She swallowed. "Do you think a traitor followed him?" Harlan considered her question, knowing listeners would want clarity on that point. "No," he said. "Smugglers don't chase their leads. They hire others to do the dirty work. Those raiders don't work for free. Someone paid them to track that pouch." "What could be inside?" she asked. "Something rare," Harlan said, "or something dangerous." She blinked, absorbing the answer with a quiet fear. "What if they think I can tell them where he went?" "That's exactly what they think," Harlan said. "But you can't give them answers you don't have." She shivered slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of the truth. Harlan noticed and tossed another log onto the fire. The flames rose, filling the cabin with warmth that eased the tension in her hands. "Sit down," he said. "You shouldn't be on that foot." "I want to help," she insisted. "I'm not afraid of work." "I know you're not," he said. "But if you tear that ankle worse, you won't be able to move if things go wrong." She lowered herself into the chair reluctantly. Her pride warred with her exhaustion, but she didn't argue further. Harlan crossed the corner and opened a wooden crate. Tala leaned forward, curious. "What is that?" "Supplies," he said. "I kept extra food in case a winter storm trapped me inside." He paused. "Didn't think I'd need it for this." Tala studied him. "You always prepare for the worst. After what I've lived through." He shrugged lightly. "Yes." She tilted her head. "But you still stay on this land alone." "There's nothing left for me in town," he said. "No reason to be anywhere else." She softened. "You could have left this land after your family died." "Could have," he said. "Didn't want to run from their memory." Her breath slowed, the weight of his words settling deep. She understood that feeling, staying close to the last place where life felt whole. Harlan set dried meat and bread on the table and slid a cup of fresh water toward her. "Eat something," he said. She ate slowly, careful not to spill crumbs on a shirt she wore. The collar slipped again, and she instinctively pulled it closed over her chest. He didn't react, and she noted with quiet appreciation how he never made her discomfort worse. After a moment, she asked another question listeners might have wondered. "Did you ever meet my people before this?" Harlan shook his head. "I've passed Apache camps during scouting years, but I never stayed long. I kept moving. Didn't want to bring trouble to anyone." "Then why didn't you leave me where you found me?" she asked. "Because leaving someone injured by a river isn't something a person comes back from," he said. "Not in this land." She lowered her eyes. "Some men would have taken advantage of someone like me." "I'm not them," he said simply. Tala's throat tightened. She believed him more each hour. A sudden noise outside, metal clinking faintly, made both of them freeze. Harlan stood and moved to the window again. Tala gripped her knife, her knuckles whitening. "What is it?" she whispered. "Horse tack," Harlan said after a moment. "Shed roofs dripping on the hardware." "Not a person." Tala let out a slow breath, lowering her knife. "Everything sounds dangerous now." "That's how survival works," he said. "You hear everything." She nodded, knowing he wasn't mocking her. He was teaching her. Harlan stepped away from the window. "I'm going to check the shed," he said. "Stay where you can see the door." "I will," she promised. Before he left, she reached out and grabbed his sleeve lightly. "Be careful." He met her eyes, surprised by the instinctive gesture. "Always." He stepped out into the yard, scanning every direction before moving toward the shed. Tala watched through the window, gripping the arm of the chair. She saw the way he moved, slow, deliberate, exact. The limp in his left leg was more noticeable today, the damp making old injuries ache. But he pushed through it without complaint. As she watched him inspect the shed, she traced her fingers over the edge of the knife. For the first time since fleeing her camp, she wondered what would happen if Harlan wasn't there. The thought made her chest tighten sharply. She didn't want to face what chased her alone again. When he returned, he closed the cabin door carefully, not slamming it. "Shed's clear," he said, but the storm knocked down part of the woodpile. "I'll fix it later." Tala looked at his coat, soaked through the shoulders. "You're cold," she said. "Come by the fire." He hesitated before sitting near her, not too close, but close enough for the warmth to reach them both. Tala shifted toward him, the firelight touching her face and casting soft shadows along her cheekbones. After a long silence, she spoke. If the raiders return, what will you do? Whatever it takes to keep you alive, he said without hesitation. Her breath caught. No one had said anything like that to her since her mother. She reached for the corner of the shirt, pulling it tighter again, then rested her hands in her lap. I don't want you hurt because of me. Doesn't work that way, he said. I choose this. She looked at him with quiet intensity. Why? He didn't look away. Because someone chose violence for you. I'm choosing the opposite. Her chest rose in a slow, emotional breath. She didn't say anything, but the trust in her eyes deepened, settling into something steady. Outside, the storm clouds thinned, revealing a muted streak of morning light. Inside, the space between them changed. Less fearful, less uncertain, more connected in a way neither of them had dared expect. And both of them knew the next day would bring danger. But neither of them felt alone anymore. The sun climbed slowly over the ridge, throwing clear light across the wet ground and dissolving the last traces of the storm. Harlan stood by the door with his rifle in hand, scanning the yard with sharp, focused eyes. Tala watched him from the chair, tension in her shoulders but more resolve than fear. The air carried a crisp stillness, the kind that followed heavy rain, and it left no room for illusions. Whatever came next would happen today. Harlan stepped toward her. Your ankle any better? She moved it carefully. I can stand, she said, but not walk far. That's enough, he replied. You won't need to run. She sensed something in his tone, a finality, a readiness that hadn't been there earlier. You think they're close, she said. I know they are. He placed a small pouch of ammunition on the table. Storm covered their noise, but it couldn't hide them forever. They'll want to finish what they started. Tala tightened the shirt around her chest, steadying her breathing. If they come in numbers, they won't get inside, he said, and they're not looking for a fight. They want answers more than blood. He paused, but I'm not giving them anything. She stood slowly, balancing on her good foot. Then let me stand with you. Harlan shook his head. You stay behind the table. They won't see you through the window unless you stand tall. If they come, they'll talk first. That buys us a moment. Listeners might wonder how Harlan planned to face armed men alone. He addressed that uncertainty by reaching behind the door and pulling out a sturdy wooden slat. I set a line of traps between the corral and the ridge. If they ride straight, they'll trip something. Tala watched him with quiet awe. You plan ahead, even in storms. I survive storms, he said simply. A distant crunch of gravel interrupted them. Tala stiffened instantly, gripping the edge of the table. Harlan moved to the window, lifting the edge of the shutter just enough to see. 3 riders appeared beyond the far fence line, each armed, their horses walking slow and deliberate. The man in front wore a dark coat, his posture upright with a confidence that didn't come from chance. Tala whispered, "That is their leader." Harlan nodded. "He's the one giving orders." The riders stopped at the edge of the yard. The leader lifted a hand in a casual gesture, as if he'd arrived for a polite conversation. Harlan stepped to the door, opened it just enough to be heard, and kept the rifle angled low but ready. "You're on my land," Harlan said, his voice calm. The leader smiled faintly. "We're just passing through," he called back. "Looking for someone." Harlan didn't blink. "No one here but me." The leader's eyes drifted over the cabin. "Funny thing," he said. "Storm washed away tracks, but my men saw signs of movement near your woodpile." "Storm throws things around," Harlan replied. The leader tilted his head. "We're searching for an Apache woman. Young. Ran from an incident north of here." He paused, letting the words settle. "You didn't happen to see anyone like that, did you?" Tala held her breath. Her hand tightened around the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Harlan didn't flinch. "I didn't see anyone." The leader smiled wider, but it wasn't friendly. "You sure about that? Because men like you don't fortify windows without reason." Harlan lowered his stance slightly, ready to fire if needed. Storm was strong. "I wasn't taking chances." The leader looked around again, eyes narrowing. "We're missing something valuable. Her father had it. She might know where it is." Harlan kept his breathing slow. "Sounds like your problem." The leader's expression darkened. It becomes your problem if you're lying. Tala swallowed a tremor, her pulse loud in her ears. She realized the raiders had no proof she was inside, only suspicion. If Harlan cracked under pressure, everything would fall apart. But his voice stayed steady. "You're done here," he said. "Turn around." The leader leaned forward in the saddle. "Do you even know what you're protecting?" Harlan didn't break eye contact. "Doesn't matter." The leader clicked his tongue. "You're a fool." Harlan lifted his rifle. "And you're trespassing." For a few silent seconds, no one moved. Rain dripped from the eaves. Tala's breath came slow but controlled. Finally, the leader raised a hand, signaling his men. "We'll search farther south," he said, though his tone carried a warning. "If we find out you're lying, we'll return." Harlan didn't respond. The riders turned and disappeared beyond the ridge, their silhouettes fading into the pale morning haze. When Harlan closed the door, Tala released a long breath that shook her whole body. "They believed you," she whispered. "No," Harlan said. "They doubted me, but they didn't want to risk a fight today." "Will they come back?" she asked. "Not if they find nothing south. They'll head toward the next valley." He walked toward her, lowering his rifle. "But they won't trouble this land again." Tala sat heavily in the chair, exhaustion washing over her. She covered her mouth with one hand, steadying the relief that made her shoulders slump. "I thought they would force their way in." "They would have lost if they tried," Harlan said. "And they knew it." She looked at him with something new in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and a quiet spark of something deeper. "You saved me. You saved yourself," he said. "I only stood where you needed someone." Her throat tightened. "You didn't owe me anything." He stepped closer, letting the silence stretch before he answered. "I don't need a debt to choose someone." Tala rose on her good foot, steadying herself on the table before taking one small step toward him. The front of the shirt slipped slightly, and she adjusted it with a self-conscious tug. Harlan's eyes didn't drop. He kept them on hers, giving her dignity even in her vulnerability. Her voice lowered. "What happens now?" "We make this place safe," he said. "And when your foot heals, we'll talk about what you want next." She exhaled softly. "I don't want to run anymore." "You won't," he said. She reached for his hand, touching his fingers lightly, testing whether he would pull away. He didn't. He closed his hand gently around hers, the warmth of his grip steady and grounding. "Stay here," he said, "with me." The words weren't dramatic. They were simple, honest, shaped from everything they'd survived together. Tala stepped closer, leaning into him slightly. Her breath brushed his chest. Harlan lifted his other hand, resting it lightly on her waist, careful of her bruises. She looked up at him with a steady calm she hadn't felt since her camp was alive. "Is this real?" she asked. "Feels like it," he said. She pressed her forehead to his chest, letting the smell of smoke and pine and rain settle into her memory. Harlan lowered his head, placing a slow, deliberate kiss on her hair. She closed her eyes, breathing him in, the first time she'd felt truly protected since the night she ran. After a long, quiet moment, she pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I want this place to be home," she whispered. "It already is," he said. Outside, the day brightened. Inside, the cabin felt different. Not temporary shelter, but shared ground. Safety. Belonging. They stayed close, their foreheads touching lightly, their breaths steady and warm. Two people who had lost everything now stood in a place where fear no longer ruled. A man who had lived alone learned to care again. A woman who had been hunted found someone who would never abandon her. And together, without speaking it aloud, they chose a life that didn't end in running, but in staying. The story ends with them safe, united, and building a peaceful future on land that now belongs to both of them.